This conference will now be recorded.
You're just changing them as you go.
Well, that would, I can reach that one.
Okay. Let's start before something else breaks. Sure.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We will start the work session at 9:34 a.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is a public informational meeting on the Waseca County Judicial Center and jail planning. Make sure you silence your cell phone. Sign in at the back. We will have a public comment, question and answer after the presentation, where you will come up to the podium. Please respect everyone's time and try and limit it to 3 minutes. Thank you. Michael?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you individuals for taking some time out of your day. I'm just going to take a few moments to walk through kind of the historical narrative of why the board is even having this conversation, and a lot of that is predicated on the ongoing inspection schedule by the Department of Corrections going back to 2022. There were, 40 or so copies of that 2022 inspection report on that table over there by the sign-in sheet. If you haven't had a chance to grab one of those, feel free to do so. But for a couple of minutes, I just want to chat through some of the historical narrative. I'm not going to read all of this verbatim. And again, these first several slides are already present within the handouts as well, too. So it's just a high-level summary of what you are already holding in your hands or have available to you. But the Waseca County Jail is on a biennial inspection report. Most recently, the informal report, as you see, was May 3rd May 3rd in 2022. Jen Pfeiffer was able to join the county board this May as well, too, as kind of a midterm update to give some better clarification, idea of where the DOC is in their perspective in general with how they are reviewing some of these facilities, and then specifically, of course, Waseca County's facility as well. We had a very high compliance rating within that document overall, within that process overall. There were two issues predominantly that drew concern. The first one, as mentioned, was much more procedural in nature. Staff were able to adjust and make that change relatively easy. The second, not so much as it pertained to the physical space, the infrastructure itself, which is not easily remedied and is a very much holistic solution and approach to a facility. Thus the, again, conversation of what a new jail would have to look like. This is just some of the regulation, Minnesota regulation. Again, not going to read it all verbatim, but this is what is specifically being referenced within that DOC inspection report as well too. The crux of the issue being the recreational and program space, or I should say the lack thereof, in the current facility. How we, as seen recently, are forced to house specific individuals should they come into our midst. So looking at, again, some of the specifics of what was mentioned in that report pertaining to activities and programs, you can see per facility, class of facility, I should say, there are requirements for what facility or for what programs, for what actual activities you have to be able to offer. Currently, Waseca County is a class 3 facility. So you can see for yourself on the screen what some of those things should be that we are able to offer given our designation as a class 3 facility. Definitionally, this again just comes right out of Minnesota rule, Minnesota law of class 1 versus a class 3 facility. Class 3 being known as a jail facility, which we are. The recommendation we saw on the Department of Correction inspection report of May of 2022 ultimately was that we are recommended, DOC is recommending that our facility be moved to a Class 2 facility, which would be a 90-day facility. Some of the comments, this would be the last page of that inspection report that you have. This is just Ms. Pfeiffer essentially encapsulating all of what she went through from a rules and regulation standpoints, and then coming to a high-level summary of and recommendation for the physical space itself as well. So though it's been updated as best it can, she's clear that it no longer is meeting the needs of the inmate population. The physical plant itself is substandard, of course, as we already went through, to meet current detention standards, especially those of a Class 3 facility. The support space, as well as was called out specifically, is lacking and in most cases non-existent. There was some concerns with the route itself being taken to court, as the only solution that our staff have currently is to take the inmates outside and up the sidewalk and through the courthouse hallways to try to get them up to the courtroom as best that they can and as safely as they can. She does mention that these have been ongoing issues, and that's somewhat relevant in terms of this was first discussed roughly in 2016. And, in reviewing even some of the prior biennial inspection reports yesterday, this isn't necessarily new information. It's just the approach from the Department of Corrections is changing, and they are a little bit more adamant that solutions are put into place in immediacy moving forward. Ultimately, as you see in that last paragraph on the inspection report, that recommendation, as I already mentioned, for moving Waseca County Jail down to a 90-day facility. So where are we at in timing? Biennial inspection schedule, as I mentioned. So May 2024, assumedly, would be the next time we will have that biennial inspection. So what does the last several months look like for the county board? We got this report in May of 2022. We became, pretty creative quickly in terms of reaching out to individuals that may be able to give us a rendering, a site design and concept for what a new jail could look like, a new justice center facility. As the conversations began, it became abundantly clear from the stakeholders involved that a standalone judicial building would be the most sensible approach, and not have two different buildings that public service deliveries and functions were being delivered between, meaning that someone would have to go back and forth between the courthouse and a judicial building. As you recall seeing within the notes a couple of minutes ago, part of the crux of the issue was the inability to safely transport an inmate from jail cell to district courtroom. So sensibly, any solution that would be implemented would need to solve both of those issues as well, both the substandardization of the facility itself and the ability to safely transport inmate population from their cell securely to the actual courtroom as well. So that was the approach that the board set forth in trying to solve. By June, we were contacting companies. By July, the board had signed a preliminary agreement just to get a site design and concept moving forward. August, BKV Group was in the building in the courthouse, meeting with all the department heads, all the stakeholders, to get an idea of what the space and program needs would be. How much space do you currently have in your office? Does that meet industry standards, and effectively how big should that space be? So what's the current plan, the 5, 10, 15, 20-year growth models that should be expected, and getting the staff and leadership input into that process. These are all of the instances or program deliveries, I should say, that was requested of BKV to factor into that new space, roughly encapsulating 75 to 77,000 square feet. So that culminated in a presentation in November of 2022 to the board. Just in a setting just like this, BKV held its work session, presented a preliminary site design and concept. Here's essentially what it could look like. Here's the blocking and stacking of how some of these departments and functions could fit on top of each other. And then ultimately, the biggest difference between this first model and future models, which we'll look at in a moment, is this used all existing infrastructure. So it was attaching new building to 50 and 60-year-old building, which we knew already had issues and literally millions of dollars of implication, as you see the footnote on the bottom, to maintain and to keep. If you have ever seen a plumbing nightmare, you will be very familiar with what is happening in the jail currently. There are several unknowns within that space itself as well. So after the board had this presentation, they then backed up and said, does it really make sense to try to build a 50-year solution, which is what they're looking for into the future, a new model attached to the existing infrastructure itself. So the next request to BKV was to go back, take all of those same programs and service deliveries, but remove all of the existing infrastructure, give us something new that is sustainable and efficient, that can be that proverbial 50-year solution. So that is what they did. It was an excellent looking model, but relatively high price tag, obviously, as you can see. That's the point of the conversation. So the total estimate given there being $43.8 million. So after that presentation, the board further inquired in the cost of the existing jail operation, meaning what does it cost us right now to deliver the services that our corrections team does. So in May of 2023, they began to capture some data and determine what those average daily populations were going back to 2017. And 2017 to 2022 averages at about 10.3 inmates per day per year, ranging anywhere from 0 to 20 inmates at any point in time throughout that span. So obviously you can see there's a large fluctuation potential in there. And from 2019 to present, it's been a little bit more than 9 per day per year as well. So again, data gathering, figuring out what is the cost of the current operation. High level summary, roughly $1.3 million, which looks at the major program service deliveries. It does not factor in many of the other things, which would be building and grounds, any kind of maintenance, the supplies themselves, the toiletries, the units themselves, cleaning supplies, uniforms. There are a lot more fringe costs that go into this, but the major program deliveries, major expenses in this model to look at, totaling approximately $1.3 million with the items you see on those screen, which come right out of our 2023 budget. So doing some simple math, okay, county board, here's what it costs us to run this county operation right now. As it stands, looking at the 2019 data going forward, again, average daily population of 9, roughly $144,000 per inmate per year to operate our existing jail facility. So in October of 2023, BKV brought back another site design concept. Key difference here being that they had removed the jail from that rendering, because the board asked the question, okay, we know how much we're paying for the existing jail operation itself. We know in theory how much it would be to build this holistic facility. What are the implied savings in theory, or what is the difference between removing the jail facility structure itself? So the difference in leaving all of the other program and service deliveries and removing simply the jail portion is $25.4 million. So we went from 43.8 to 25.4 in that model. The difference being that obviously removing the entirety of the jail structure does not alleviate the county from some level of corrections responsibility. There are still 3 holding cells in this model, in this scenario. There's still intake, there's still booking, there's still processing. Again, it's a model, but it essentially was the catalyst for this conversation here this morning to try to garner some additional input into the process. So to first address the question itself as to whether this should be considered critical infrastructure, we had to first answer the question, is there an alternative? Meaning, can it be done elsewhere? Can it be done for a lower cost? And thus far, the answer to that question to us has been yes. And that is simply predicated on the fact that there have been 3 counties, Steele, Blue Earth, and Le Sueur, as you see on the screen, that have expressed willingness to work with us to house inmates. Now, clearly, this does not at all speak to the effectiveness of those alternative solutions. This simply says there is potentially an alternative solution. It doesn't say it will work well. It doesn't say it will be good at all. It simply says there is an alternative there. In late 2020, Steele County had approached Waseca, Dodge, and Rice counties to inquire if they'd be interested in buying into their current detention center facility. It had been expressed by their commissioners that it was a significant burden to the levy. It was, in their words, significantly overbuilt at the time, and they have been running at less than a fifth of capacity for quite a while. So they were looking for additional ways to make it solvent. This was, of course, before Rice County voted in May of 2021 to move forward and build their own jail facility for about $50 million. So they were lobbying essentially the three adjacent counties to them to buy in and make it a little bit revenue solvent, financially solvent. As you are likely aware, Rice County did move forward on a 3-2 vote in May of 2021 to entertain a jail facility at about $50 million. There was, and you're welcome to look up that news article, of course, as you have time to do, some interesting dialogue and commentary in it. There was some discomfort that has been cited by these commissioners here as well too, as far as it's a lot of money. Does this make sense for the community long term? Why or why not? And that's ultimately the same questions that are being posed here this morning. Dodge County didn't bite at the offer. They were in a relationship with Steele County for a number of years. They chose to take their inmates recently to Olmsted County. We have some information as far as what that looks like, but at the time, Waseca County said, thank you, but no thank you. We're not interested into buying into that facility and trying to solve your problem for you effectively for a rather large price tag. So after that presentation, again, the board rekindled in the June presentation, I should say. So that was the $43.8 million price tag. The board went back to Steele County and said, we really don't want to buy into your facility, but is there an alternative here that we haven't talked about yet? And that was something that they were interested in entertaining. What resulted in that conversation ultimately was a draft of a contract. And I've made this caveat many, many times in conversations, but I'll make it again one more time. There has been absolutely nothing that has been agreed upon, whether it be a site designer concept, whether it be a contract with another adjacent county. The only thing that the board has seen to date is educational and informational items to allow them to make an informed decision. Anything else other than that has not happened. There's nothing signed. So again, they are information gathering, and what we have is good information to say, here's again, potentially the alternative solution. Whether it's effective, not the conversation I'm having or not what I'm exclaiming at all, just that here's a piece of paper that spells out exactly how this could work. You see some of the details for what that would mean. Effectively, we looked at the average daily population and said, well, we know we need at least this many beds because that's what the data tells us we need over the last several years. So let's structure an agreement based upon this data. And that's what occurred. So what does that mean? In future operations, say there is no jail, I have no idea. And I say that because we just started to get to the point to say, what is the staff implication of this? And I just told you a few moments ago that because there is not a formal jail structure or facility, that does not remove the responsibility of some administrative corrective function for the county. Things still have to happen here, regardless. That question hasn't been answered. So there's some hypothetical narrative spelled in here that said, well, in theory, if we had to transport inmates from A to B, that may be a burden on current deputy staff. That may take away deputy staff from current scheduled shifts. We can't necessarily place that burden on the local PDs. So the board had the desire at the time and has expressed throughout that, well, we don't want the scope and function really to change for the municipal police departments in this model. So we're making this a county problem and keeping it as a county problem. Thus, there has to be a county solution. And that county solution, in theory, could be an additional 2 to 3 deputies. And I say anywhere from 1 to 3 because that's not my house. And I don't know exactly how that's going to work and how that needs to work in terms of the schedules and the shift differentials and things of that nature. So additional staffing needs, as I said, are just being analyzed. And I've come to discover this was an educational piece for me that no, you do not have to be a licensed deputy to transport individuals from point A to point B. So again, continuing to learn things throughout this process. Still a multitude of administrative functions that need to continue on. So we've heard a lot about this $20 million threshold. So taking a moment to just explain the difference here. Since May of 2022, when this inspection report was devised or handed to the county board, it became evident that, okay, something is happening. One way or the other, something's going to be happening, because the DOC is telling us that in the not too distant future, we're going to change your operation, whether you want us to or not. And that is currently where the county board is sitting. And since that point in time, they have been trying to isolate current levy, current programs and service deliveries, isolating and capturing cost savings, knowing that the reality of a large scale project, a large scale capital infrastructure project building, is going to be happening in the not too distant future. And that could have an implication of bonded debt, general obligation bonded debt. The county has an extremely favorable bond rating and an extremely low debt to levy ratio. That means that the county owes very, very little money to anyone compared to its normal operation. That's a good thing. We like both of those things in that middle point. So an additional $20 million of bonded debt equates to approximately $1.5 million of levy burden per year. And what I mean when I say additional is, if we looked at that $43.8 million price tag, effectively we could say the first $20 million is covered under the existing levy program. Anything over and above that is going to have a levy implication. So then the next question, again, informing ourselves, what are those levy implications and how do we understand them? That $1.5 million, if you look at bonded debt and you look at borrowing debt as a public entity, some simple math to reference is roughly every $10 million that you bond, every $10 million that you borrow, it has about a $750,000 annual implication to the levy. So if you think back to previous referendums and you look at that referendum and say, here's the cost of the project, here's the potential impact to your property taxes, it follows the same methodology. So every $10 million you try to borrow, about a $750,000 impact to your levy. So the board says we can shuffle these things out over the next decade and figure out how to absorb 2 instances of that $750,000. So $20 million of bonded debt. Once it exceeds that, the picture gets different. You can obviously only cut so much of existing program, absorb so much before it becomes an extended tax burden or an impact to the levy itself. Just talked through all of that. Looking at the specific property tax implications, that may be a little small for you, but hopefully you have a variety of screens you can peek at. And actually, let me just do this. I can zoom in a little bit at a time. So if I'm a 2024, and granted this is, I only have 2024 information. I don't have that proverbial crystal ball to see how this actually plays out 20 years into the future. But what I can tell you is sound as far as the 2024 implication. So all this really is showing you what the estimated tax capacity, tax impact to you, an owner, would be based upon a $1.5 million increase to the existing levy. So if you look at your proposed notice that you got recently and said, okay, the county's gonna add $1.5 million on top of that existing levy, this is in theory how it would impact you. So this first set of 5 up here is residential homesteads. That next set of 5 is residential non-homestead. That next grouping is your commercial properties at those various market value price points. And then down at the bottom, I think you can see that, is a per acre calculation. So that 10,700 is the median per acre tillable price for 2024 for a owner operator. If you are a farmer, this applies to you, of course. But the $2.04 versus the $4.11, why the difference? It's how the state law works. There are tier value limits, and you'll be familiar with that if you're a farmer as well too. But once you exceed a certain estimated market value for your ag land, you go to a 1% tier instead of the 0.5% tier you're on. So let's get a little bit more specific. How does this spell out, since that's a lot of information? Over the life of the loan, if you're a residential owner of a $250,000 home, you'd expect to pay approximately $1,790 using 2024 data. Same thing if you're a $350,000 business. This, and mind you, this is simply the county portion, the county implication of the tax. This has nothing to do with city, school district, state. This is solely county data. If you're an ag owner that farms 350 acres, you would approximately pay $14,280 using 24 data. If you're owner operator of 1,500 acres, you'd pay approximately $108,000 using 2024 data. And that specifically is where that tier limit kicks in. And I used 350 as an example because on average, at about 350 acres is where you're going to stop paying on tier 1 and you're going to go to tier 2. So that's that difference between the $2.04 or the $4.11 per acre. So I did that with intent and purpose, of course. But every year we know values change. Every year the law changes. So again, we're not looking in a crystal ball here. We're looking at the information we have today and projecting as best we can for what can happen. Just as before, looking at the ADPs from 29 going forward, if we add that $1.5 million of jail operation, specific to jail operation, as I said, that average daily population calculation per inmate per year escalates, as you can see on the screen. If you use the 2017 data, which again is about 10.3 inmates per year, drops a little bit, but still the numbers, as you can see. I've had several opportunities to meet with individuals, whether public, kind of the unbiased third parties, if you will, as well too, and staff that have given me some good feedback and comments. So what I try to do is encapsulate some of what I was hearing on let's say the pro and con side of things, for lack of a better term, but express concerns of not building a jail. If we don't build a jail, what about this? This may happen. So this is some of what I'm hearing. The inability to find consistent housing for inmates, unsafe road conditions while transporting inmates to another facility, taking deputies off patrol to transport an inmate. We've talked about some of these already. Not being in control of the situation or not taking care of our own, being in a sense beholden to another organization for how they're housing our inmates and what that expressly looks like. Part of that has been tied to the work release conversation. What if another county that we're working with doesn't honor that, isn't willing to allow somebody to be transported for their job where otherwise we may have allowed them to do so. We'll be stuck with inmates with no place to go. We've experienced this even today within the last month or so, where staff were calling not just adjacent counties, but adjacent states to see if there was a bed for an individual that we had in our facility. So also an existing issue we're running into. Will the community feel unsafe in some way? Is there, in that institutional loss, if you will, of not having a jail that has been there forever, is there a change in our perspective that in some way makes us feel less safe than we currently are? A potential loss of jobs, and I hesitate with that one because, as I said, this is a conversation that's just started. We know that there is still much work to be done regardless of any of the models we have seen from BKV to date, but again, something cited to me, so I wanted to reflect it. Potential increased liability, some of that goes back to the transportation side of things, the inability to house an inmate effectively, etc. That could fit under many things, I'm sure. One quote I heard a couple of times: contracts are only good as the people that agree to them. Meaning if we entered into a contract with a Steele, a Blue Earth, or a LeSueur County, the counties that have talked to us thus far, what happens when this board goes away? What happens when that board goes away? What happens when our sheriff or their sheriff goes away? You're working in a 2-year to 4-year timeline, essentially, with elected officials, is how that was being explained to me. So relevant. You'll have to pay for the cost of a contract forever, but the $20 million once. I heard that a couple of times. A contractual solution you're committing to for a lifetime is how that was being expressed. Whereas you could build a jail right now for that $20 million price tag, and eventually that ends. That bond matures, you stop paying for it. So on the other side of the coin, expressed concerns with building a jail, from what I've heard. Inability to adequately address mental health needs of inmates and the associated liabilities. This ties into the second point as well, too, in terms of some of the unfunded mandates that the state continues to impose upon our correctional officers and our jailers, which they are simply not trained to do. So there needs to be a much better holistic solution for mental health in the jail system. This isn't by any means unique to Waseca County. This is a state and or national issue, but it's been a problem that's been aggrandized, I would say, over the last several years at all facets of government, and there has not been a cogent solution that's been put into place as of yet. There still needs to be one, but it should not be up to the jailer to figure out what that solution is. DOC standard of life for a new jail is 20 to 25 years. Why is that relevant? Because the next point, the length of the payback period of the bond is 20 years. So the DOC comes in and tells us that, well, on average, we'd say a facility that has a useful life of 20 years. Steele County went through this recently as well. Their facility was built in 2023. They have spent millions of dollars maintaining it and updating it, and are now committing to moving their sheriff administration and patrol out there as well too, and an additional multi-million-dollar reinvestment. They cost a lot of money to build. They cost a lot of money to maintain, was the impetus there, and that's fair as well. Significant fiscal impact of the jail and the impact of property taxes. Something that was a recurring theme has been the recently built jails are nowhere near capacity. So what's happening around us versus the capacity that they have to house, how many beds do they have versus what is their population. So I updated this as of yesterday based upon the various county websites for who is currently being housed there comparative to their capacity and when they were built. The only exception there is Freeborn County. I could not find anywhere, and nobody could tell me specifically when that facility was built or remodeled. So just want to give that caveat there that I could not get a firm date on there, so I didn't put one on there. So there's a little nuance here as I was going through some of those reports. You see a lot of the same names twice, meaning that some counties are hosting, I guess I could say inmates for another county. That was specifically happening in Le Sueur and Rice County. There were 7 names that were repeated between both jail rosters that are actually Rice County inmates. So just to give the clarification, if you were to go out and look at it, you would say, hey, Le Sueur County says a population of 28 today. True, 7 of them are Rice County inmates. So I left them in the Rice County line and not the Le Sueur County line. So grand total, there's 550 empty beds in adjacent counties as of yesterday. That does not mean that they have the staff to fulfill them, and I assure you they do not. So there again, it has to be a caveat there that it's easy to say, well, they have 515 empty beds. There's plenty of room. It doesn't mean they can take 515 inmates. So I have to take that with a grain of salt as well too. So where the board is at today is what I would devise as a pre-May and a post-May solution. We know that there is some change coming in May. We know that the Department of Corrections will be on their biennial schedule and be in our facility in May and come up with a solution. And the best case solution for Waseca County Jail is a 90-day temporary holding facility, because that is what they have told us. And that is what has recently happened in Rice County that I'm sure you're familiar with too. And Rice County, frankly, is a heck of a lot further down the road than we are with building a facility. And regardless, the DOC still came in and said, yeah, but we told you this, and now you're in a 90-day facility. So they're a 90-day facility. They're planning on opening a fall of 2024. Again, that's that news article you can reference from earlier and take a look at yourself as time allows. But the best case scenario for us in May of 2024 is a 90-day holding facility. Will that change our operation? Again, naive of me to fully answer that question. Will it change the operation to an extent? Yes. What that is, I don't know. So we have to have a May 1st, so to speak, or really a June 1st solution, and a then post-May, post-June solution for what does the 50-year-ish solution look like for Waseca County. Mr. Chair, I think I can probably wrap up there and turn it back to you for anything else.
Thank you, Michael, very much for what you've done for this. There's a couple things I want to say. There has This is a work session. There is no decision made, and there will not be a decision made today. We're going to open this up for public comment and questions and answers. If you're going to speak, come up to the podium, state your name and address, speak what you have to say. We are here to listen to everyone today. I mean, that's what it's about. It's a public meeting. If someone prior to you takes your thunder, let's keep the redundancy to a minimum with the time constraint in mind. So with that being said, the podium is open.
Good morning, Commissioners, County Administrator, community, and law enforcement. For those that don't know, I'm Jay Dulas, Waseca County Sheriff. And I want to stand before you to let you know that I'm in support of a new Waseca County Jail. I'm here to support our Sheriff's Office, staff, and the stakeholders that we work with that hold criminals accountable and work to keep our community safe. The staff that we have are dependable and professional, many of them that are here today, and I want to thank you all for that. We do have the oldest jail operating in the state of Minnesota. As mentioned, the DOC has addressed several deficiencies in our current facility, and upcoming inspection is planned for 2024. We need a new Waseca County jail and have needed a new jail for years. Our inmate population is becoming more dangerous, and mental illness of some degree is associated with most of those inmates that walk in our jail doors. We've had inmates in our jail facility that no one will take, too dangerous or too mentally ill. No other jails or hospitals will take them. As mentioned, recently staff has called all over the state of Minnesota and even surrounding states for someone to take a female that was recently in our jail that was too dangerous and too mentally ill. Again, no one would take her. This has been common in recent months where we've had several inmates, male and female, no jail would take. It's becoming the new norm. When outside agencies have agreed to take an inmate, they call us back to have the inmate returned to them, or to return to us. And if we refuse, they bring them back. If we don't have a jail, where will those inmates go? Remember, as previously stated, other jails and hospitals have refused to accept or return those inmates. There appears to be a cost savings for not having a jail. Is there truly a cost savings? Waseca County has never been without a jail. And what are the costs of not having a jail? There are many people here today that I am sure want to speak. So I will end with this. I encourage all of you to meet with our stakeholders, law enforcement, the county attorney, office, probation, courts, all of our other stakeholders to discuss what additional costs and a conflicts will arise from not having a jail. I thank you all for listening. I thank you all for being here. I want to end with that I believe we need a new jail, and I support a new jail. Thank you for listening.
Good morning. I am Rachel Cornelius, your county attorney. Multiple people we have in custody, and we have them at the same time. We have them on very serious matters, and they need to be secured quickly. So they need to be kept separate from each other because we need to investigate, we need to do interviews. We need that not only for legal reasons, but to protect not only suspects, but victims, and to protect the integrity of the crime scene. In the last year, just the last year, I'm not even talking about historical, in the last year, we've had a drive-by shooting, which was also an attempted murder. We've had another shooting here in Waseca, which was another attempted murder.
We've had another attempted murder by stabbing and an armed robbery, amongst many other serious drug crimes, burglaries, more cases than I can even begin to talk about. All have multiple officers involved. We need all hands on deck when things like this happen. It is very important that we have a jail local that we can place these people so we can continue to do our investigation. When you're collecting evidence, it's important to do a lot of work on scene, and you can't do that if officers are being drawn away from the scene for 45 plus minutes to take someone to a jail in another county. It's just not feasible. We do have an issue where, we have had a lot of issues with women in the jail recently. As Sheriff Dula stated, we had one particular case where we had to hold her. We had no one else who would take her. Finally, thankfully, another jail has taken her. But we had a jail who has historically had very good mental health facilities even reject her. They had her for a while and they said, you cannot have her. We cannot have her anymore. And she was someone who was very homicidal, very assaultive. She had assaulted multiple people. And so we had to take her. We didn't have any other option but to bring her back. And that was to protect public safety. We can't just release her to the streets. It was a really, really important deal. Now I want to talk about mental health. Michael mentioned that, it's not the role of the jailer to handle this. However, we don't have a choice in these, they're called GAP cases. You can Google GAP cases, and you'll find out that Minnesota has a big problem with cases where people are found incompetent, but they need to be held somewhere because they are, in the case of many, mentally ill and dangerous. We can't just simply release them to the street and say, well, try to make yourself competent, come back in 6 months and we'll see how it goes. So that's not protecting public safety. We need to have a place to hold them. And unfortunately, with many of our mentally ill, male and female, both of them, we have had rejected from our jails that we have tried to place in neighboring jails. When we are short officers to help while others are transporting, just remember that then you're not only are you short staffed for helping at the scene of a crime, but also what happens when new calls come in? What are victims going to do when they need law enforcement, they need help, and people have been called away and they aren't in town? Janesville and New Richland, they generally have one person working at a time. They don't have the manpower to help with transportation. And, again, to what I said before, who is left to cover that city when an officer is gone for over an hour? Law enforcement is in a shortage. We have a crisis right now for trying to find law enforcement. And for that matter, I know that there was a discussion about transportation officers. To some extent, we have a workforce shortage as well. So trying to find people to fill those positions would be very concerning, and I hate to rely on hiring of that staff when we have staff who are willing to stay, want to stay in our jail, and are doing a great job in our jail. Court matters. We need defendants to be accessible to their public defenders and their attorneys. Our jail has always been very good about allowing attorneys time and space to meet. How will that work for other counties? Where are inmates going to sit when they're waiting for our court hearings? Do you know how hard it is to work on a case and work on resolution when you simply don't have a defendant there? We often have forms, documents we need to go over with them. Their attorneys need to talk to them in person. Yes, we do a lot by Zoom, but we're also do a lot in person. Some things have to be done in person. Sometimes attorneys need that, and Ms. Johnson's here, and I told her to come. She's our main public defender here. Many times attorneys need a one-on-one contact with their client in order for them, like a face-to-face contact, to have them understand like the severity of their charges and to discuss resolution. Some they don't want to talk over serious matters on a telephone call or a Zoom. They want to talk to their attorney. They want to have that relationship with their attorney. When multiple people are in custody for court at the same time, where are we going to house multiple people while waiting for court? Are the deputies expected to bring them back one at a time? It's going to be a scheduling nightmare and logistically is not feasible. There are also many safety concerns, including concerns for victims. And where's that secure place going to be? Again, you know, the purpose of a jail would be, a new jail, would be to address some of the issues that we have with transporting inmates, you know, down the public sidewalk, through the public buildings. You know, where are those people going to be out and about? So we will be transporting all of our inmates now, and to me, and that just brings even more liability issues, more concerns. At minimum, we need a jail with a detention courtroom. And even if you didn't do a detention center, even if you didn't do a judicial center, at minimum, we need a jail with a detention courtroom. Where are we gonna house juveniles who are in need of custody if we don't have a jail? Sometimes we're looking for a placement for them. We don't take everyone to Anoka for placement, and they might not be appropriate for Anoka for placement. Legally, we can have a juvenile stay in our jail for up to 24 hours if we have to. It's a waste of resources to bring them to Anoka overnight when they might just be released the next morning by the court, and then we have to go back up and get them. We are required under our legal standards to use the least restrictive alternative. So having them housed in our local jail for a period of a few hours is often the least restrictive while we're trying to find another placement for them, some other type of juvenile alternative facility. It might be a family placement, but we need a place that we can put them. Will our insurance premiums increase in travel and protection of the inmates going out of county? When you get insurance, they ask you where do you work versus where is your home, and you know they assign more cost and your premiums based on your risk going up, and the more that you're out driving. So what's our liability going to be, and what's our daily transport of inmates, especially during inclement weather? And then on the weather note, you know, the timing for transportation is going to be an issue. Court doesn't just stop because we have bad weather. While we do have some hearings by Zoom, you know, we have jury trials. What are you supposed to do when we're in jury trial and there's a snowstorm? We still have court, we still have jury trials. And then with regards to the contracts, I know that the language was that, you know, that they would be guaranteed beds for up to 10 inmates, but you know, like we said before, we're constantly called to go pick up people that we thought we had secured in a facility that can meet their needs. Finally, I want to wrap up with, I am constantly talked to by judges from other counties, by public defenders, private attorneys, other business partners, how well we work together in Waseca County. While our jail is broke per se, it needs to be fixed. Our partnership and our relationships are working well, and they are not broken. And the criminal justice system will be directly impacted, which affects public safety. And I have a very steep concern that if we don't have a jail, it is going to dramatically impact and potentially break our good system that we have in Waseca. Thank you.
Randy, I'll take 1 minute if I may, commissioners. I don't want to repeat what the other two justice partners had said. I'm John Sherrill, probation director in Waseca County. Just real quickly, and it's a very difficult decision. I fully understand that. Just to point out, there are a lot of times that our agents in our office are over in the jail. They go there daily to go meet with clients. We have bail studies we have to do in the morning that is very time sensitive that we may have to go over there. We have regular jail visits. If somebody is just in custody, if they're on a probation violation, we have to go meet with them on a time sensitive matter. So with that, if we are housing inmates out of the county, there will be an increased cost with some transportation with our agents going to a different county as well. So we do support a local jail, but we understand that this is a very difficult decision for the commissioners. Thank you.
Randy Peterson with Disco. I got a couple quick questions. Will this jail be approved? New jail, would that be male and female? I mean, it can hold both sexes.
That would be staffing. which we already are unable to staff male for the male inmates. Try and staff it with females for female inmates. In the middle of Blue Earth, in the middle of Steele County, with a tax capacity that's significantly less than both neighboring counties, I don't even see how we could hire help. I'd say it for.
And, you know, you said, $43.5 million or something like that. And I don't know if Mr. Johnson, you were talking about Rice County, Blue Earth County. I read the Mankato paper. When Blue Earth County was building their new jail, it was just million after million after million of overruns. You're not gonna do this for $43.5 million. I would figure 25% on top of that, and I'll bet you're gonna be in the ballpark. So you're gonna figure 55 million. That would be my guess. I know nothing. But, and you know, how deep is our tax well? You know, everybody, what you did to us this year. How deep can you dig that well with the dirt not falling back in on you? That's all I got to say. I'm not for it or against it, but that's good. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Alec Delaney. I'm with the Minnesota Public Employees Association. I'm one of their attorneys. We represent a lot of public employees across the state of Minnesota. Here in Waseca, we represent your highway department, your courthouse, or your general unit. And then in particular today, I'm here on behalf of our representation for the jail, their staff, including dispatch, along with the deputy bargaining unit. I want to start by saying I don't envy the position that you're in. I know it's a difficult one. You got a lot of hard decisions to make. And I also want to respect the fact that I do not want to be redundant. So appreciate the points that have been made by the county attorney and the sheriff as well. What I will leave you with is hopefully a objective perspective of what's going on in other jurisdictions that are not just neutral to this area, but across the state, and the fact that I respect the idea that it might be a viable option to hire more deputies to assist with transports and things of that nature. What I don't foresee being a plausible solution, however, is how you're gonna hire them. It's been brought up that the hiring issue is massive. Right now, I believe on the Minnesota Post Board, there are over 200 postings, many of which are offering for multiple positions. The city of Minneapolis alone is well over a couple hundred. So that right there tells us that there could be anywhere from 300 to 500 vacancies of peace officers in the state of Minnesota. Now, if you have the well of applicants available, I'm sure you'll have 86 other counties and hundreds of municipalities calling to get that answer from you. But I don't foresee a way in which you're gonna be able to hire the staffing in order to do it. Like I said, I didn't want to be redundant. I'll leave you all with this. I think with a new jail, you have a known quantity and a known solution that you can address these concerns. Moving forward without one, you do not have that guarantee. And I think that would be a great disservice to not only the employees that have dedicated their careers to that jail and to the law enforcement here in Waseca County, but also the public in which they serve. So thank you for your time.
Good morning. My name is Rick Schultz. I live in rural New Richland. Again, applaud people for having this meeting and giving the opportunity to lay out pros and cons of what's before you in the decision making. Want to start off with, we've always been proud of our law enforcement in the county, whether it's a city police department or the county. We've always been secured by them, and we applaud the job they're doing. However, brick and mortar doesn't make our forces better or worse. It's the people that you employ. So I think we have to be cautious on this. This isn't an easy decision, like everyone said. Some things that jump out at me is examples of inmates that we can't handle. Again, I go back to, does brick and mortar solve that? It sounds to me like we have a staffing concern, in whether that building is 1970 or 2025. I don't know that changes the ability to handle some of the people you're dealing with. Something that jumped out at me is these neighboring facilities at 20% capacity, I do think that's a viable option. Again, we wouldn't accept that in our own business to be at 20% capacity. So I don't think we can step aside and say that that isn't a viable option. I look at it, there are inconveniences. Does it matter if this potential inmate gets in a squad car for 10 minutes or 30 minutes? I question some of that, so I think we do need to look at that. But those are all things that we've elected you to decide and to weigh out. So I think we need to respect where you go in the research and again, all viable options. Some of the questions that I come up with through this, and I just like some clarity. We said that we levied 10 million here 2 years ago with anticipation of needing. Is that a correct figure, or 20 million?
No, we budgeted the ability to bond 10 million.
So could you explain that just a little bit of how did that affect our taxes when you did that? We're paying for that currently then.
Right. So the best way to explain that is right now, the levy is what it is for 2023, roughly $17.7 million. So what the board had started to do over the last year and a half essentially is figure out within that existing levy framework, where can we pull money back? Where can we isolate dollars to pay for that first $20 million bill? So that's how I was trying to explain that if we had a $20 million building, that effectively would not touch or impact your taxes at all. But it would
services. Something's giving up to get that then.
To an extent.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
Because I think I would agree, or these commissioners would agree, that there are no, I hope you're more efficient than that, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is that there isn't anything sitting out there that we're wasting.
No, so that model that the commissioners looked at was over a decade of time. So it was, how do we create levy sustainability over a 10-year period? So you're not experiencing that roller coaster ride of, well, great, we're at a 1% potential increase, but next year it's going to be 10. That was wanting to be avoided. So, you look at the last 4 years, the levy increases have been 1.92, 1.95, 2%. The preliminary for next year is 1.5, could be lower than that. So that's ideal, to be stable and predictable, and at best, even at that, we're under inflation in all of those years by a wide margin. So each year they're finding ways to save dollars and cut dollars out. This is just a much larger expanded effort of that same ideology over a 10-year period to say, we know what the bill will be. How do we pay for it in a way that creates sustainability and predictability from the constituency standpoint, so you don't see those 10% numbers from a levy?
I'd just like to jump in here too. Part of that 10-year model has to do with some bonds that we currently are paying on that are coming off.
Correct.
And so, you know how that works.
Absolutely, and that's how you show how you avoid a big increase in a project like this. However, it's still tax dollars. We would experience a tax reduction if this project were not to go through and those bonds came off, obviously. So that's a little bit skewed in presenting this as not a tax increase, because we could have a tax savings if those bonds fell off. But I understand your approach, and that's the most palatable for the consumer, the taxpayer. So I applaud you for looking at those options. Again, to respect time here, my question, hearing bits and pieces coming into this, it's a large project and quite possibly a needed project. It's a big figure, so it gets our attention as taxpayers, and then I would just leave you with, if we commit to this project, it obviously will jeopardize some other projects in the county. And I'm sure you people have a long list of places money could be spent. And I just ask myself, is this our biggest priority in the county at the current time? And that's what you're elected to decide. So time, we appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Dawn Johnson. I'm an assistant public defender. My caseload is predominantly in Waseca County. I also handle some cases in Rice. The third district public defender system is not located in each county. We have main offices in Owatonna, Rochester, and Winona. So our attorneys travel all over southern Minnesota to go to court. Blue Earth County is a different judicial district. The public defender office over there does not handle Waseca cases. It would be very time consuming to have to travel to Lesueur or Blue Earth County to talk to and review audio and video discovery with clients, because that takes time away from public defenders being available in court, and thus cases would move more slowly through the judicial system. As stated by Ms. Cornelius, it gets cases resolved faster when I can quickly meet with clients in custody face to face. And usually the quicker a case is resolved, the sooner the client is released from custody, which saves the cost of housing him or her. Thank you.
Good morning, folks. Thank you for allowing us to make our public statements here this morning. Thank you for doing the job that you do. You've got a big load, and I think all of us understand what you're facing here. I'd like to take the stance for law enforcement this morning, specifically in what the impact will be against the law enforcement, what they'll have to put up with if we do not have a jail. First of all, our county becomes completely dependent on surrounding jurisdictions to house violators. Well, that's kind of redundant. We already talked about that, which means the following could happen for an officer. The arresting officer will have to coordinate with supervisors as to where that violator should be taken. In the meantime, the person is sitting in the squad. This means everything is on hold. The officer is no longer available to respond to other calls. Or his or her supervisor to find a bed with the violator, and arrangements are made to transfer that violator to wherever it goes. The officer is now spending time taking care of the violator rather than investigating this crime. The arresting officer then must transport the violator to that location, check the violator in. How far is that going to be? We don't know that yet. Return to his or her duty status, of course, will double that time. Each incident will entail a different length of time to complete all of this, meaning the officer could be out of service for a length of time which cannot be estimated at this point, during which our city or county could be short an available officer to respond to any and other emergencies that might crop up while he or she is taking care of that call. In addition to this, consideration must be taken for the possible exposure to endangerment to the arresting officer. If the violator is in any way violent, threatening, or under influence of either drugs or alcohol, if any of these are suspected, there must be additional trained personnel. We've run across that this morning too, but to accompany that transfer beginning to end to ensure the safety of the officer. Let me remind you here that Minnesota has seen fit to legalize marijuana in our state for recreational use as well as medicinal purposes. And as of now, there is no way to legally field test for it. I can't imagine what my son or daughter would be doing in the field trying to figure out that alone. Try to imagine that. I must also point out here that there are no contracts, as was pointed out. Am I correct, Mr. Johnson?
Correct.
There are no contracts or arrangements to accept any of our violators anywhere at this point. Okay? It also must be pointed out that the contract, with another jurisdiction in the future, there could be no guarantee that that contract will stand. After any election cycle, that contract could go away. Considering this scenario outlined here, Waseca County could have violators housed in several surrounding counties at the same time, creating a nightmare. Each of these outside agencies could, at any time, for any reason, require Waseca County to find a different bed. We're setting Waseca County up for failure on several levels if Waseca County has no jail. We are the Waseca County seat. That isn't gonna change. This is where the Waseca County Courthouse is. This is where the Waseca County Attorney has offices and is required to manage the lawbreakers from all of the agencies in Waseca County. How about an officer in Janesville? What does he or she do when he finds a violator or has a violator, or there are multiple violations and has to deal with two people at the same time? They're working alone. How do they do that? The same goes with New Richland or any other jurisdiction in Waseca County. Without a county jail, we'll be creating a list of problems for our law enforcement community that will affect every citizen in our county, one way or another, sooner or later. What do we do with multiple people being taken into custody? If there are serious matters, we need involved officers sitting on the scene for evidence collection, investigation. We don't need officers being Uber drivers for our courts. Our county agencies are short-staffed the way they are now. You heard the possibilities of hiring right now. They're not good. What happens if one officer is transporting and he or she is the only officer on duty? Consider trying to hire officers for those retiring or taking other positions in other jurisdictions. Hiring law enforcement folks in Minnesota is difficult enough right now with the culture that we're seeing, without creating an environment that does not support them. And that's what we would be doing if we do not have a county jail. I'd just like to take a minute. Would all the present law enforcement officers please stand up in the audience? Please stand up. Take a look, ladies and gentlemen. These people protect us day and night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Let's give them a hand. We need a county jail. What do we need, however? You might legitimately ask. I understand that too. A recent discussion I had with Sheriff Dulas showed me that we do not need a Taj Mahal. Others refer to it as a justice center, where there would be not only a jail, but also meeting rooms, courtrooms, judges and attorneys' offices, holding cells, as well as the requirements for general public that are going to be demanded. What we need, in my opinion, is a whole different facility than what some seem to want. Again, it's my opinion. Common sense needs to prevail here. Waseca has lost several large employers in the last 8 to 10 years and is scheduled to lose more, and along with them, the families that were employed. They're now forced to go to work elsewhere, or they're commuting. There's talk of needing a new school. Is our population exploding? Not that I heard last. I don't think so. I certainly do not claim to have knowledge, of course, of what we can afford for the next 20 or 30 years, but I have a strong common sense approach as to what I see happening. And when it comes to expenditures versus income in our future, we do not need a justice center. We need a county court, a county jail, excuse me. If we lose our ability in Waseca County to control our inmate population housing, it will create a vacuum for the beginning of just another step with no going back to the creation of a culture where some point in Waseca will become totally dependent on another jurisdiction for our law enforcement, just as we do now for many of our shopping needs. We will have become a hollow shell with no control, no hiring advantages to maintain the level of enforcement we now enjoy, which is keeping our communities, our businesses, and our families safe. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. I've, of course, given you this map. I've called each of these counties. The information that follows on the next page following that, you can certainly refer to. I agree with Mr. Johnson. There has been indications made that we have a lot of beds around our area that are not occupied. And as Mr. Johnson has pointed out, and I'm trying not to be redundant here, but I guess I am, that staffing is a problem. I talk to Le Sueur County very, very regularly. I visit the inmates up there on a regular basis. I visit the jailers, they all know me. Said, what would you do with a contract? And so we don't do contracts. I said, never? Well, never is a bad word, no, probably would entertain it. But we don't have staffing. How about females? Oh yeah, we have staffing for females. Okay. So my question to you folks is, what would we do with females? Are we gonna build for females? You heard the county attorney and what her problems I've seen in the most recent past, and it's not gonna get any better. Are we gonna shut it off just because we think we can't hire somebody? I think we better leave that on the table. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your attention, and I appreciate your thought and your diligence with this.
Good morning, Steve Johnson, Janesville Police Chief. Just a couple things that I wanted to point out. One of the whole reasons for this conversation was for the jail. It seems like that cost has created a discussion of what about not a jail? Echoing the sentiments of the former party that was up here. We need the jail and the courthouse, court admin. The rest of that is not required at this point. That is not why we entered into this discussion. One of the things that you had pointed out was that the cost for a $200,000 house would be a $68 a year increase in the tax levy for that party. I understand that it goes up for the farm land and stuff like that, but that's $68 a year. That number is on the 20 million plus whatever's required above and beyond that. So you're talking about a $43 million building, that's for a justice center, okay? Has the discussion come up about having just the jail and the court admin? That is not gonna be another $45 million or a $45 million project. So that's one option, and that is a $20 million bond in today's $20 million. You had said that, I don't know if I have the numbers here, 439 to 639K a year for hiring transport deputies. That number doesn't stay the same. Okay, 20 million does. 439 to 639 is gonna go up every year. The contract with another county is good today. What happens the next time that contract comes due? Because I guarantee Steele County's not gonna guarantee a contract for the next 20, 30 years. That's gonna go up. There's no promises, there's no crystal ball, okay? Except that the bond today is for 20 million. A building today, granted there's overruns and stuff like that, that stuff's gonna go up, but that's today. That's not 10, 15, 20 years down the line. That's a promise that we don't have, okay? And it does impact my budget, and it impacts every budget in this county. So just those things I wanted to point out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is anyone else here for public comment?
I just need one more. I'm Jennifer Johnson, rural New Richland, and I just want to make two quick comments or statements. In my EMS career, one thing I learned is you don't think about EMS till you need them. And if we don't have them, that's when you really think about it. And to that, a really serious comment to think about, if we lose our jail, I guess I can't say 100%, but I can probably say 99%, we will never get it back. And that's one thing that's something that really needs to be thinking about, is if we lose it, we're not gonna get it back. So if something doesn't go right in the other plans, we know we have nothing.
Okay.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah. Everybody safe. It's interesting to listen to government speak. All the tragedies that we have to contend with, which in part is government's fault, and not acting upon things that we should have dealt with years ago. Being on the school board, I listened to that time and time again. Well, it's only $5, it's only $10. People's wages won't, they're impacted by taxation. I think the big scope of things here is, what's the realization of what's happening? The state of Minnesota just in 1 year increased their budget 40%. 1 year. That has a tremendous impact not only on individuals, but it has a tremendous impact on municipalities and government entities that want to pass bonding things to facilitate the things that are needed. But that money is gobbled up by this continuation of government to spend money that we don't have. I mean, we're spending, what, almost $750 million. So the politicians in St. Paul can have what they feel is an adequate facility in which to work with them. And yet we deal with these tragedies, or not tragedies, but situations throughout the state of Minnesota that need funding, but that's all taken away because of those things. So would it be nice to be able to build a new jail? Sure. Would it be nice to build a new school? Sure. But we just really don't have the money and revenue in which to do that. I mean, we don't know what the true impact of it is that last year's budgetary process in St. Paul caused. They're biting at the bit now to spend it $2.5 billion that currently they have the extra spend. And it's never a discussion about giving any of this money back. And granted, I may be going off point here, but really I'm not, because all of this has an impact on each and every one of us. And so we have to not only look at what we can do here in Waseca County, we need to look at what the ramifications of these other government entities are having upon us, and the realization to what causes. Because they're the ones that drove us to have this problem in the first place, and they're continuing to drive it. If you don't think I speak the truth, go speak to the cops in Minneapolis, or particularly those that have left. So it's unfortunate, but I guess one avenue that I would see as a solution is, as a school district, they used to have to pass resolutions for spending through the voters. Maybe this is a thing that the county needs to look at. What does the county people, residents really think? And give them the opportunity to speak, because it should really be about the people.
Public comment?
Good morning, Joe Flipwood, Woodville Township, Section 14. I am a sergeant for the Waseca County Sheriff's Office. Standing up here in front of you today, I'm speaking on my own behalf, no one else. Foremost, I want to thank everyone that has come and recognized the value of this component and taken the time to express your feelings. This truly is a pivotal piece of our county's judicial infrastructure. I understand that there are parties concerned about the remodel or replacement of this facility. There may be people that think we don't need this right now. Speaking to those people, I would say you're right. You're absolutely right. We don't need it right now. We needed it 20 years ago. This is not this board's fault. It's not the county administrator's fault. It's not Sheriff Duos' fault. Given hindsight, I believe previous administrations would have completed this project many years ago. It's up to this administration and this community to rectify our predecessor's shortcomings. This facility is going to come at a cost, no question. As a local taxpayer, I thank you for taking a hard look at this. I understand the valid concern with spending millions of taxpayer dollars. Having said that, I also recognize that this is a critical piece of our public safety infrastructure. We need a local facility capable of holding our inmates. The inherent building costs associated with building a security facility such as the jail are undoubtedly higher than that of a single-family home, a school, a library, or a typical commercial building. Nothing in our business is difficult, but this community's safety is difficult, and it's not negotiable. I firmly believe that this group can put together a safe, appropriately scaled, and functional facility without being fiscally irresponsible. It's my opinion that there's a misbelief that housing and traveling out of our community to house these individuals is not a daunting task. It's no big deal. Hire another cop, buy another squad car. Hiring these staff members is not easy. They've been talking about it all morning. Retaining them is even harder. The fact is, we will be forced to do more with less, and the cost will come at the expense of public safety. Adding additional pressure to an already depleted and struggling career field is not a viable solution. That is a problem that is not going to be solved in this room, but it's a fact that we cannot afford to overlook nonetheless. Fiscally, at face value, there appears to be a significant discrepancy here, and on paper it may be. However, this is not a business. The criminal justice system is not a business. I am not willing to put a price tag on our staff and our community safety, and I would challenge this administration to do the same. The thought of abstaining from moving forward with a new jail while pushing forward with a new standalone justice center is inappropriate. This is a local network. These teams are individuals with roles with the overall goal of countywide public safety. The entire scope of this project was to upgrade the jail and bring these services all together, not to transplant the primary participants to an out-of-county location. Personally, I would forego my new office in a new standalone justice center in lieu of the primary need, that being the jail. In a fiscal effort, it appears we would be willing to put an already depleted group of law enforcement officers out on the road, day and night, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, on Minnesota roads, with an inmate or two alone. Speaking from experience, I can tell you it is an eerie feeling being alone in the middle of nowhere and having an out-of-control inmate in your back seat, trying anything they can do to get out. They don't want to go to jail. No one wants to go to jail. And some will attempt anything to stop that from happening. Sending officers on constant, around-the-clock transports to and from outside agencies is not our solution. These officers would be traveling to and from wherever the latest low-bid contract is on inmate housing, as we can rest assured any quoted pricing will not remain stagnant indefinitely. Once our facility is gone, we will have no choice but to pay a premium asking price moving forward. Some of these inmates are nice and cordial individuals. Some have made an unfortunate mistake. However, many of them are not. Many of these inmates pose a significant threat to law enforcement and public safety throughout the community. To put it modestly, we have and are housing extremely difficult people. These are people that nobody else wants to hold. As recently as last week, we transferred an inmate to an out-of-county jail. Last week, mind you, this is one of the facilities that we're evaluating for a possible contract. After a short stay, that particular jail refused to continue holding the inmate based on the inmate's behavior. Waseca County was told to come pick the inmate up. That inmate is now back in our facility. We are dealing with the inmate because they are our responsibility. They are this county's responsibility. The out-of-county jail made the untimely business decision to not house that individual anymore. We, as a responsible agency, did not have that luxury. We do not get to choose how cooperative or violent our inmates are, and who we are or are not willing to hold. Prior to incarceration, this inmate continued to repeatedly terrorize members of this community, taxpayers of Waseca County. I bet if the board were to call the victim, they would be willing to pay a little extra towards the levy to assure the inmate remains incarcerated. I would. This is just one example. There are many more. They've been talking about them. This is not a new or isolated incident. These other facilities have their own issues and their own bad apples. I can assure you they do not want ours. They want our money. And in foregoing our jail, we are writing a blank check for the future. Violent crime in our area is certainly on the rise and not tending in the right direction. Personally, I've been involved in 4 shootings in 3 years. The justice system is not a business. We are not here to make money. We are here to keep the peace. The jail belongs to the community. This is about our community's stance on crime and our long-term safety. Waseca County needs to maintain control of its violent offenders. Waseca County needs its jail. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Joe.
Public comment?
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Steiker, Waseca County IT. I work with you guys. I've worked with everybody else here in the county. I've seen the personal process, armed robbery in my house, all of the process of how that person was dealt with our court system and everything else. And working with the jailers and within the rest of our staff, I don't see how we can go without a jail here. Cost of everything later, if we have to do this, it's just gonna go up. It's gonna be even worse for our community, I believe. I haven't touched on the aspect of how current other beds that are open, are those facilities properly staffed, or are they struggling like we are? I didn't see any of that posted. I'd rather pay for this now. Well, I can pay for it, my tax, and have my children have to pay for it later. They have to pay 2, 3, or 4 times as much as well. If we go without a jail, I can only see this community being less safe, just because our staff is already being strained as it is, with everything that they currently have to do. Me, not being in law enforcement, I've got the perspective of dealing with everybody that's dealing with this directly. I just have a perspective as a person in this community, and that's what I think about it. Thank you.
Thanks. Public comment?
My name is Dan Swenson. I'm a resident of the city of Waseca. Some decades ago, I was on the police reserve in this town. And it's pretty obvious to me that we need a new jail. However, I also believe that we don't need to spend a fantastic amount of money to have a real flashy facility. It's obvious from the previous speakers that there are many good reasons for maintaining a good, decent jail at Waseca County. I'm going to try to be brief here. It was a number of decades ago that the idea was proposed of having a unified law enforcement idea in Waseca County, and instead of having 4 different law enforcement agencies. And I was thinking about that maybe there's some financial advantages to that. And so maybe that is one way to take a look at the financial part of this and see if there's an advantage to that idea. Now, I know that involves a lot of thinking outside the box,
but maybe it's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment? Anyone else for public comment? Anyone else for public comment?
I'm Brad Milbrath, Waseca. I want to commend this board for moving forward with this step. Since 2000, DOC has stepped into the new building. I've been through 6 different studies. And this is the first one that's gotten me. So I appreciate looking at this. I believe that the county does need a jail. One that was proposed or done by DEK can be reduced down a little bit to save taxpayers. But I appreciate this board stepping up and going forward. Thank you.
Anyone else, public comment? Anyone else for public comment? Anyone else for public comment? Michael, do you have anything to add at this time?
No, sir. I was just checking online to make sure there weren't any individuals trying to chime in, but nothing else.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to make a comment on where, and the rest of the board, I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but they can make final comments also. We obviously are looking for the best way out of a tough situation with the least amount of burden to our constituents. We have a smaller tax base. We're trying to improve our tax rate to attract businesses back into the county. Everybody knows that we've lost commercial business in the county, and we've worked really hard as a board to try to bring our tax burden down and right size our taxes for this county in order to attract commercial business back in, to spur growth within the county. It's difficult for me to look at spending this kind of money when there is another option. Just simply contracting out the inmates versus what it's costing us today is a huge benefit to our budget. And that's where my mind goes. We've heard from a lot of staff here today on why we should have a jail, and I understand that. And we wouldn't have even brought this forward if there wasn't for a county 2 doors down from us that are doing this and doing it successfully. Granted, they've never had a jail, or not in recent history have had a jail, but they do it, and they do it successfully. We wouldn't have never brought this in front of us if it wasn't for Dodge County doing it and doing it successfully. I've talked to their commissioners on multiple occasions, and they enjoy not having a jail. I understand that it's difficult for staff to make a change. It's difficult for a community to make a change. And I'm not saying that that's the change that's going to happen, but we knew that we would have some resistance because change is difficult. But we do think it's a viable option that can benefit the county along with reducing the tax burden. But that's why we brought this forward. We wanted to hear from the taxpayers. We want to hear from the constituents on how they feel. And again, we would have never brought this forward, but we know that there's a county that does it and enjoys the fact that they don't have a jail. But it's change. It's huge change. Thank you. Steve, you want to weigh in on any of it?
I would just say, I want to thank everybody who's come today to listen and to learn and also to comment. We set these meetings up because we want to hear from you. And we're going to hear again tonight, and I look forward to that time with more citizens to hear even greater perspective. I do want to steer us back to the bigger picture just a little bit here. This isn't just an issue of whether we build a jail or don't build a jail, or build a justice center or don't build a justice center. Right now, we have a jail that is demonstrably inadequate, and the Department of Corrections is going to make sure we know that in a real substantive way come May. And we also have, and I know we hate to hear this about our historic courthouse, but we also have a huge liability in our courthouse, the way we get prisoners to and from our courthouse in an old building. And that is another problem. Building, and I appreciate the idea that just build a jail and don't worry about a justice center. That doesn't fix our security issue with our courts. And we have lots of juggling things. We care first and foremost about the safety and the working conditions of our employees. We are statutorily obligated to take care of our prisoners and to do that in a humane and thoughtful way. We have not talked at all, really, today about the security in our courthouse and the potential dangers we have there. I've been in the building, and I'm not in the courthouse all that often because I usually work from home. But I've been in the courthouse when something has gone sideways upstairs and all of a sudden there's a lot of yelling. And I wonder whether somebody's going to come over that railing. And so we got a lot of things that we're juggling here. And I have appreciated hearing a lot of different contexts, but I hope that everybody is patient as we continue to look at the facts that come forward with this. You all have provided some context today. But I know for my part, I'm looking at that big picture thing and saying, I want to solve these problems for a longer term rather than a shorter term. But I know that there's also going to be bumps in the shorter term just with the DOC inspection. So thank you again for coming. We continue to be open to feedback. And we will be. We've got a lot of work to do, and I appreciate all our partners that help us do that. Thanks.
One thing, maybe two. We know how much the brick and mortar is. We know that's a number. That's a figure that is in print. We don't know what it looks like to contract out inmates, if you will. We know how much inmates cost here. We know how much they would cost with a new jail. As everyone stated earlier, we have staffing issues. The cities have staffing issues. Everyone has staffing issues. We are in the county seat of Waseca that has a Federal Bureau of Prisons female institution in it. You tell me how we're going to fill the staffing issue in this county when they're going to offer way more money at the federal level. And I'd already stated earlier, we have Blue Earth on the west and Steel on the east that can offer more money than we can for staff. So if you put up a building, you know what that monetary amount is. Now you try and staff it, and I'm not even talking about housing females there. That's a whole nother outlook. You tell me how this would happen in this county. So I want to thank everybody for coming. The other meeting will be at 6:30 tonight. Yep, all right. Thanks again, and we are going to adjourn at 11:13.